Hi, I'm Ed Amoroso from Tag Cyber, and I'm here with someone I've known for a very long time, Maria Cirino, who is the founder and managing director of 406 Ventures. Maria, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Ed.
Welcome
how are you?
to our studio. Oh, I'm doing great.
Pleasure to be here.
We are looking forward to learning from you. I'm sure there's a lot of people watching who are either thinking about getting funding or visiting a venture capital firm or
hopefully.
Well, tell us about that business and how you got into this and a little bit about 406.
Well, you know a little bit about my background.
I do.
I was an entrepreneur and an operator way before I was an investor. And had deep experience having started a company in cyber, and then was introduced to a couple of really, really smart cyber white hat hackers, and they were having trouble getting their company funded. And so I worked with them for a couple months and really helped them from the entrepreneur's view, having been there and done it and started a company
more
and
than
sold a
20
company.
years ago, right?
Yeah, this one goes back probably about 15.
Yeah.
And I helped them with their business model, told them to take off the ties, told them to be themselves in meetings, and just kind of relax into it, and kind of pointed out from my own experience, pitching VCs and getting money from VCs, what would play well and what they should stay away from. And that turned out to be helpful advice for them. That company actually ultimately turned into a very successful company called Veracode, which I know you know.
I do.
And in fact, you were so helpful on that journey because you were one of the first people that I went to and said, is this a good idea? I think it is, but what do you think? And you gave us some great advice at the time. And that's really the job. The job is to work with early stage entrepreneurs, help them hone their idea, ask the appropriate questions, poke the appropriate holes in it, and then help get them introduced to the right people who would eventually become consumers of their service or their product. And of course give them the capital that they need to get their business started. But it really is much more of an assisting role rather than a starring role. The entrepreneurs are the stars.
When's the right time for somebody who's running a small company to come visit with someone like yourself to get some help? Is there a time or a trigger or some internal thing? When should they come?
Well, at 406 Ventures, we are an early stage VC firm. So we will invest typically when there is a well thought out idea. We love to have a little technology that we can see or get our hands on. But we have funded entrepreneurs, from the idea phase all the way through to I have my first beta customers. We typically don't fund after they've gotten their first institutional investment. We're typically the first institutional investors, and so that's the role that we play. We then help them get additional funding for later rounds, but we like to go in and be the lead or the co-lead in a Series A.
How did they figure out who to call? Is there like a Baron's Guide somewhere that you can go to and where you'd know that you guys would be a good match for what they need versus, say, Kleiner Perkins or something?
Yeah.
How do you figure that out?
It's a great question. So I don't think it's hard to find a VC firm. Everybody has a website.
And you Google.
You Google it. There are guides. There are lists that get published and that sort of thing. And there are only, there's probably less than 500 VC firms. Well, maybe more if you include incubators and some of the seed stage funds. But there's not that many. And I think what's really important is do a little homework and look on that website and see if that firm has done deals in the same space that you're thinking about starting a company in. And if they've done deals in the past and they've been successful and they're not currently in a company that would consider you a competitor, chances are they're going to be all ears because they already made money in that space, and now they know a little bit about it, and now you're coming up with the next generation or a fresh idea, and then of course try to network your way into that partner who did that deal and will understand something about your space. In our firm, it's easy because we only do 3 things. We do cyber, healthcare, IT, and cloud and data. And so if you're doing something cyber, you're going to come to me or my partner Greg. If you're doing something in healthcare, you're going to go to the other partner. So it's the websites can help you out.
Now, what happens after they get approved? Do you write them a check and say good luck, or is it a little different than that? I think I know the answer to this. But
I mean, we definitely work with that entrepreneur during what we call a diligence period. It's generally a few weeks. Generally doesn't last more than 6 to 8 weeks. And we're kind of working alongside of that entrepreneur, getting to know that entrepreneur, trying to be helpful during that time. Not only are we trying to understand the concept better and the person better or the people, but we're also trying to be helpful at that point in time. So we're making introductions. Those introductions are supposed to be helpful to the company, but they're also helpful to us because we can gauge, as we did with you a long time ago with Veracode, okay, how does one of the most preeminent chief information security officers for one of the biggest companies in the world, how does he think about this idea? If he likes it, then we go on and we talk to a few more. If he hates it, we want to understand why. And so, that diligence period can be a bi-directional get to know you, and it should be helpful for the company. Once we've invested in the company, that is also the kind of work that we do, right? At that point, we consider ourselves on your payroll as the entrepreneur. So we have a vested interest in your success. We don't want to be remote controlling your company. We don't want to be driving from the back seat, but we do want to appropriately be helpful. We have a monitoring role as fiduciaries, right? Because we have investors that give us the money to invest in exceptional entrepreneurs. So we do have to monitor, but really our job is to help. What do you need? And we get calls all the time from our entrepreneurs saying, hey, let me run something by you. Here's something that's going on. I want a little advice on how to handle it. When you were an entrepreneur or when you were a CEO, did this happen and how did you handle it? Can you introduce me to somebody at this company? Do you guys know anybody here? We're looking for a, terrific XYZ person in marketing. Can you help us find that person? So, when you've been an operator for a long time and then you've been an investor for, upwards of a decade, you should have a pretty deep network, and using that network to the advantage of your companies is a really important part of the venture capitalist job.
There's a famous paper in Harvard Business Review you probably read where I think it's called, Do You Want to Be Rich or the King? It comes to this question of whether you replace CEOs, or rather founders with other CEOs. Talk to me a little bit about that. When somebody comes to you, is it generally going to be the case that at some point that founder is going to slip into a strategy role and someone else comes in to run, or how does that work?
We're not big fans of generalizations, right? We just don't believe that there's a playbook and one size fits all.
Makes sense.
And we really, just are working alongside that founder, that entrepreneur, and if in fact we conclude that the company will succeed, at a faster, better rate with another CEO, the first person we talk to about that is the entrepreneur. And it's typically the other way around. The founder will come to us and say, I'm not having a good time anymore, right? I haven't touched a keyboard in a year and a half. I'm adjudicating, these petty squabbles between my senior team. I don't like it. It's not what I want to do. I want to go think big thoughts. I want to go be an evangelist. I want to go, and
it's never, I'm so sick of all this tech, I want to get into business.
Exactly. And so I would say the vast majority of the time that those changes happen, it's a founder-led discussion. And then, we basically help identify, and as a board and as a team, we make the decision together and kind of who that next person is going to be. And we're really careful about it because, it's really tough to replace founder magic. And in the best possible scenario, especially when it's a founder-led conversation, the founder, you want that founder to stay.
Stays
you
right
want
there.
them to continue to be valued. They usually retain a seat on the board. Maybe they chair the board. They still have CTO role, evangelist role. You basically create a role for the founder in terms of what they really want to spend their time doing and how they can add the most value to their company. It's still their company, right?
That's great. Let's talk cyber a little bit. Some themes. What are you excited about? Like what everybody talks AI and this and that. What do you guys get excited about?
It's really exciting. I think there's a a total evolution happening where AI is coming together with cyber. Obviously, everybody's talking about it. It was a huge theme, at the big conference, security conference, RSA conference this year. But we're seeing it in practice now, right? We actually,
I am too.
And we're seeing how beneficial, the marriage of these technologies can be, and the kind of results that they can produce that technologies that were developed even 5 years ago can't even touch. And so that is exciting because, while nobody will ever be silly enough to promise hack-free, you certainly can extend a level of protection and a layer of protection that didn't exist a couple of years ago by combining these technologies. So we're seeing that. We're excited by that. We're seeing the replication of what, great companies have been doing for a long time with really smart people. We're now seeing the automation of that and creating. We just invested in a company called Randori, which is recreating basically your entire security infrastructure.
Oh, what a cool idea.
In a model, and then basically doing what would be the equivalent of red teaming exercises on an automated basis all day long. And so the level of visibility that you can get into how an attacker would potentially attack your environment is unprecedented. And so we're really excited about technology being leveraged to produce a level of visibility that has not heretofore existed within big companies. We think that's the best protection you can have, is seeing something early enough to then try to take countermeasures.
You get excited about services companies as much as product?
For us, products and services are almost interchangeable, right? We'll rarely invest in anything anymore that's not cloud-based, right? So here you have a technology. You used to be able to put it in a box and sell a disk, right? Then it became a license. Yeah, now it's like it's a service. If it sits in a cloud and you subscribe to it, there's a lot of tech associated with that. There's probably hundreds of engineers that have built it. But at the end of the day, it's a technology-driven service. It's a cloud-based service. We get very excited by those models. We get less excited by models that have to leverage expensive hardware and have to be delivered, and then you have like a service component. That feels to us like kind of the old way of doing it.
Long cycle times,
right,
expensive.
Right. Much harder to start up too, right? A lot of the magic of startups over the past decade has been, and the reason I think you've seen so many proliferate, they can do a lot on a little, right? So, I mean, this is a perfect example. They don't have to go out and get their, sign a lease and get their own office, and,
right.
They can take advantage of shared environments, they can take advantage of shared compute, they can take advantage of, all these things that drive startup costs way down.
Yeah. In cybersecurity, how's the U.S. doing compared to other countries so far? You and I both Americans, but we live in a global, especially in cyber. There's all these Israel has some really beautiful companies coming out, UK,
That's right.
and so on and so forth.
Right.
What are you seeing?
I still believe the U.S. is leading, in terms of technology and advanced cyber.
Yeah.
I think Israel, has always been and will continue to be a very strong force there. We're seeing a lot of Israeli startups come over earlier than ever and plant a flag in the U.S.
Right.
It's tough for some U.S. based venture capital firms to invest in Israeli companies or outside. A lot of firms, by mandate of their investors, the limited partners who invest in venture firms, want those investments to be Delaware C Corp. So there are some restrictions that some funds have to follow.
Interesting.
But we're seeing smart entrepreneurs, come to the U.S. early, plant a flag. They'll keep R&D, they'll keep engineering development, in their home country, whether it's Germany, whether it's Israel, and they'll build sales and marketing here, which we think is a really good plan.
A favorite question of mine for people who are talking to companies, and we were chatting about this before, is any crazy stories? Like, I'll bet when you're talking to your peers, having a cup of coffee, you probably chuckle about, hey, remember when? And then you talk about this crazy pitch or this funny thing that happened.
Yeah.
Does it ring a bell at all? Anything
We've
like
had
that?
some crazy things happen.
People bringing a crayon presentation, and maybe not that dumb. But.
We had a guy that literally got to the 1 yard line.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, when you finally come in for the final presentation, it's pretty much a checkbox, right? I mean, you literally have to completely disintegrate.
Had already laid out the company, and you were excited.
And your sponsor, the partner who's sponsoring you, has been bringing the team along at the weekly partner meeting and saying, hey, we're getting more and more excited about this, and I'm getting more conviction around this, and here's why. And then, so that final presentation is really supposed to be a check mark. Yes, it gives the other members of the team an opportunity to meet the entrepreneur directly and ask questions, but something really bad has to happen for that entrepreneur not to walk out with a check. And it was just, it was amazing. I mean, one of my partners asked a question. It was a fairly innocuous question. And if this guy could have reached over the table to throw a punch, he would have. Ended the meeting, that was it.
He got angry?
Angry, like just lost his stuff completely based on a fairly straightforward, non-personal, non-threatening kind of question.
Wow.
Yeah. So good to know.
So
we hadn't seen that in working with this guy for probably 8 weeks of diligence.
A good tip would be, if you're pitching to not get into a violent fist fight.
Don't get into a fist fight. Really good advice. Hopefully not the best advice I've given today, but that's a piece of advice. It happens. So crazy other things we've seen. A woman came in. The big product was, and we don't do any consumer stuff, we don't do any food, but so she was really just there for advice. And she said to me, I have a product. I said, what is it? It's a bagel that doesn't have a hole in it. I said, isn't that called a roll? Well, it's square.
Spoken like an Italian or a European or
it's
all of us.
It's square. And I said, okay, and how can I help you? She goes, well, I started the company a year ago. I'm selling $4 million worth a year, and I only have one customer, and I don't know what to do now.
Oh.
So that got my attention. And even though it wasn't something that was appropriate for our firm, because we have this, pretty strict mandate
so it's
around
like
enterprise
a
IT.
bagel roll sort of thing.
It was just a bagel in a square shape with no hole. And
Yeah.
I mean, this woman had so much chutzpah, shall we say. She, had the idea one morning, went to the airport, got on a plane from Boston, ended up in Washington, D.C., went to the Pentagon, right? Went to the reception desk at the Pentagon and said, who is your supplier of food products to the Air Force? Right? Had a meeting a couple hours later, with somebody in that organization, pitched this idea.
Yeah.
They liked it. They said, bring us a prototype. She went back to Boston, hired a contract baker. So this woman had almost zero startup costs, right? And was running this very profitable business with no employees and one customer.
Wow.
And she said, what should I do?
What'd you tell her?
Don't change a thing. It can only get worse from
Make
here.
Make little airplane shaped
Exactly.
Add
Add another product to your line.
Yeah.
Right. But don't change anything else.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
Funny. Now listen, I'm going to ask you a future question, because you and I are veterans of this. We've been at cyber for a while.
Yep.
And as you stare at something long enough, kind of setting aside maybe the investment and startup piece, when you think about just cybersecurity from a threat perspective, again, taking off your hat as someone who makes money and deals with things, but now putting a different hat on as maybe an advisor who knows a lot about this. I trust your opinion as much as anyone. What do you kind of think? Does it seem like we're catching up on defense, or is it getting worse? I mean, we look at tech companies, but stepping back, do you feel safer now than you did 20 years ago? Or
No.
I don't either.
No. And it has nothing to do with the rate of technology and how good technology is. It has to do with, the rate of criminals getting rich from
So
creating cyber attacks.
offense innovating faster
Yeah.
than the rest of us.
I think that's true.
Isn't that a little depressing? I hate to
And nation-state
cover
activity.
that on a fun video with you,
Nation-state
but
activity. It's an arms race, and I think it'll ebb and flow. But I am really, really excited, going back to the earlier point, about the intersection, about AI combined with advanced cyber, combined with cloud.
and automation.
And automation gives us a reach and an ability to defend the way we've never been able to
Do we
defend
get
before.
to a weird point where it's a big video game, where there's automated attacks, and we have automated defenses, and we sit and curate and watch and see who wins the video game? Is it sort of like that?
That would be a great movie.
We're gonna do like some kind of dystopian thing.
Exactly.
But it's sort of like that, right? I mean, the
Yeah.
offenses are now automated.
Yeah.
So you're stopping an automated attack with an automated defense. Seems like we're
It's-
just having electronics hit each other.
It's not that far off. It's sort of
weird,
the
right?
modern day trade wars, right?
Boy, when we get to that point, I think that's time to go really turn in my retirement, right? Because that's going to be really strange when it's all really just a big video game.
Right.
But I think you're right. I also feel a little less safe, but I'm optimistic because I think automation, definitely machine learning and
Yep.
intelligence, I think you put that together, we probably have a shot at maybe catching up.
I agree. And I will
Knock
tell you
wood.
this, it is the absolute best place for entrepreneurship
Yeah.
and professional investment,
Yeah.
right? Because it is an arms race. The biggest companies in the world that would normally stay away from new technologies from small companies seek out technology from
do.
startup companies in this particular
cyber,
space, in
yeah.
cyber, because that's where they get the best protection. And so it's unusual for a company that might have 100 people to be able to sell very effectively
Yeah.
to a Fortune 10 company.
Big bank, yeah.
Right, and that's what can accelerate the growth of a cyber startup, and that's what can create a lot of value in a relatively short period of time.
You enjoying yourself?
I love it. It's a
look
lot
like
of fun.
You're having fun.
I am.
Yeah,
I am. I miss getting calls from you every once in a while.
I'll have to start calling more. No, but I appreciate you coming to visit us.
It's a pleasure.
Here. It's so nice chat.
I love what you guys are doing. I love the model.
Oh, yeah, we're going to have you do I'm watching Tag Cyber. When we're done with this, we'll have you do a promo so
Fantastic.
people watch this video can see that. Thanks for stopping by our studio.
My pleasure.
Wonderful to see you again.
Great to see you.
And we will see you next time.